place. The place which has brought us all these days to the Delphi Economic Forum, the World Heritage Site of Delphi. This panel is organized by Europa Nostra in collaboration with Elliniki Etairia, our country representation in Greece. Europa Nostra is delighted to participate for the very first time as content partner of the Delphi Economic Forum. Special thanks to Simeon Somokos, president of this forum, for having included Europa Nostra in the DEF family and for sharing our conviction that Europe's cultural and natural heritage plays a key role for building a more beautiful, more sustainable, and more inclusive future for our Europe. But this discussion is dedicated to the memory of Costas Carras, who has sadly left us on the 28th of February this year. Costa was the charismatic founding president and driving force of Elliniki Etairia for a period of 50 years. And during the same period, he was also the iconic leader, the unforgettable vice president of Europa Nostra. I have had the privilege of working closely with Costa for a period of 30 years. He was like my spiritual father and generous and trusted friend. Of course, Costas Carras was so much more: an eminent scholar, a distinguished businessman, someone who has inspired the environmental thinking and action of the Greek Orthodox Church, an active protagonist of building trust and promoting reconciliation through dialogue and better mutual understanding between Greece and Turkey, between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, and between various communities in the post-war Balkans from where I come from. But above all, he was a humanist, dedicated to the values of democracy and human rights, an impactful conservationist, and a true European who contributed strongly to a value-based European Union. Last but not least, Costa was in love with Delphi, its spirit of the place, and was dedicated to the preservation of its unique cultural and natural landscape. And this is why we believe that the best way to honor his memory and to express our immense gratitude and respect for his visionary leadership and many, many achievements is to discuss this important topic today and to make a collective pledge to pursue his legacy by ensuring that the cultural and natural landscape of Delphi is preserved for future generations. I'm delighted to introduce our three eminent panelists, who all knew very well Costas Carras. Lydia Carras, documentary filmmaker and ardent conservationist, who was also the lifelong companion of Costas Carras. Lydia has founded Elliniki Etairia with Costa and is today the president of this formidable civil society organization which celebrates this year its 50th anniversary. Pavlos Kalligas, professor emeritus of ancient philosophy at the University of Athens, who has been for the last 6 years the director of the European Cultural Center, which proudly hosts the Delphi Economic Forum. And Bruce Clark, writer and eminent journalist from The Economist, who has a deep knowledge of Greece, its past, and its present. Unfortunately, Jorge Chaminet, president of the European Music Center in Bougival, who was announced in the program, alas, fell ill yesterday and had to cancel his trip, but he has communicated us his thoughts, and I shall try to just to sort of convey the essence of his message. But the best person to start this conversation is, of course, Lydia. Dear Lydia, together with your beloved Costa, you have been a tireless campaigner for saving the beauty of Greece's culture and environment, and you have walked many kilometers along the paths all over Greece, but especially the ancient paths around Delphi. Tell us why and what have you done to save this unique landscape, and tell us also about your concerns for its future. Lydia, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Dear Secretary of Europa Nostra, dear Sneška, dear Paul, dear Bruce, dear friends, I'm happy to be here together with Europa Nostra, with whom we are united with whom we unite in a very strong bond. As over the years, for important issues of heritage and nature, they have stood by our side, as we have stood by their side, for the good of our Europe. Needless to say, how moving it is for me to address this session dedicated to Costa. He loved Delphi, which we visited together innumerable times, always discovering something new in the spirit of this place. He had himself twice spoken at the Delphi Economic Forum, and he admired the achievements of Simeon Tsomokos, who has succeeded in making this conference such an international center of debate in just very few years. This is certainly due to a great vision, amazing organizational skills, the pursuit of excellence, but I think also to the place itself. The archaeological site and the stunning verdant landscape. A landscape that helps one to go beyond the daily concerns, to feel a sense of peace, and to think of more global and essential issues of humanity. In this very same place, in 1978, an international symposium was held on landscape protection and architecture. Leading Greek and foreign scientists concluded then that the natural environment of Delphi is a rare feature, as it combines the imposing wildness of deep ravines and rich biodiversity with the special climatic conditions created by its proximity to the sea. The ancient cultural background of Delphi makes self-evident the need for this landscape to be saved and its historical memory to remain alive in our collective consciousness. For this landscape, Costa, with Elliniki Etairia, Society for Environment of Cultural Heritage, ELET, and many citizens, has fought for more than once. The first intervention by Elliniki Etairia was of vital importance to the region. In 1980, the historic village of Arachova, steeped in the scents and colors of almond trees, something you certainly admired coming to Delphi, was destined to have a national road to go through it, something that would have unavoidably led to the demolition of all the traditional houses along the narrow historic main road. The shoppers along this road were campaigning in favor. Elet organized a national campaign, this time with the wholehearted support of the highly regarded journalist of Kathimerini, Konstantinos Kalligas. Finally, the road remained intact, the houses were saved, the national road moved around the village as it should have done. The village of Arachova today is enjoying one of the highest incomes in Greece. As Kalligas wrote in a famous main article in Kathimerini at the time, χάνοντας το ύφος μας, χάνουμε το ήθος μας. In a way untranslatable, but something like losing our identity in the heritage, we lose our ethos. In 1981, Elliniki Etairia, with other organizations, successfully opposed a proposal for an American investment producing alumina in the region. This mobilization not only succeeded in the final refusal of this industrial development, but had a much deeper effect. By the end of the year 1981, the Greek state demarcated the Delphic landscape and determined the terms of its protection. Most of the land and sea areas from then on would have been included in the Natura 2000 network of protected habitats. And yet, just 4 years later, it was announced that a large alumina refinery plant was to be installed this time with Russian cooperation, only 11 kilometers from Delphi. Great pressure was exerted in an attempt to install a large factory of Etairia at a distance of only 11 kilometers from Delphi, whose chimneys would have been seen from Delphi and smoke would have covered the landscape. For Elliniki Etairia, the landscape of Delphi cannot be fragmented, as it is bounded by Parnassus, Giona, the Reka Gorge, the ancient olive grove, and etc. Elet organized the campaign with public discussions, interviews, TV programs, while collecting signatures from important personalities around the world. We secured the warm support of the Council of Europe, Europa Nostra, who else? The European Environmental Bureau, etc. And yet, the government persisted then, even naming a date of the opening. Then we held a new press conference in May 1987, which was covered by Greek and foreign television, radio stations, and newspapers from around the world. This was followed by a visit to the European Parliament, even letters to Mikhail Gorbachev, yes, and the calling of an international meeting at Delphi jointly with the municipality of Delphi. Faced with the international outcry, the Archaeological Council withdrew the permit. The announcement was made by Melina Mercouri as Minister of Culture. The result was greeted with worldwide enthusiasm. At the same time, 1985, the wider area of Delphi was proclaimed a World Cultural Heritage by UNESCO, World Cultural Heritage by UNESCO, and recognized as one of the most iconic landscapes in the world. You might think the Delphic landscape was finally saved. Oh no. In 2019, the revised regional special plan for central Greece allowed again industrial interventions, especially alumina factories with turbines and fish farms within Zone 2 of the Delphic landscape. Elet, the regional authority of central Greece, by then the person that was heading it had changed, and the municipality of Delphi appealed to the Council of State against this plan. This time, only the municipality of Delphi achieved the banning of mining activities in forest. So, this magnificent Delphic landscape now is exposed to proposals of wind turbines, industries, and mining in Zone B of the Delphic landscape, with the final decision of siting depending on one single person, the Minister of Environment. This is surely no protection for a landscape so important to the world. Well, we are not giving up. Our next project in the area is the Greek Paths of Culture in the wider area, because the wider area has wonderful, historic, some of them ancient paths. We'll celebrate the unique landscape and cultural heritage of Delphi. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lydia. This was a fascinating illustration why it is important to have a strong civil society and people gathering and speaking up and organizing. And, you know, in a nutshell, you told us that the battle is never over. You think it's done, but it has to continue. And this wonderful project that you have showed, the Greek Paths of Culture, I just want to tell you that that has won the European Union Prize for Cultural Heritage, Europa Nostra Award, and we celebrated together at the marathon in 2019, an extraordinary project that you have been very much the inspirator. But since you mentioned also the battles, I think Michael Skoulos is in the audience, so who was at the time president and also afterwards the European Environmental Bureau, very important people who have been participating, and want to greet the mayor of Delphi who is with us. So you can see, Mr. Mayor, you have quite a civil society committed to help preserve the authenticity and integrity of this landscape. Now, I shall now turn to Pavlos Kalligas. During the opening session yesterday of the Delphi Economic Forum, all speakers, starting with the president of the Hellenic Republic, referred to the spirit of the place of Delphi. They refers to Delphi that used to be the navel of the center of the ancient world. So Pavlos, as eminent scholar of ancient philosophy, how would you explain to the participants of this forum what is the true spirit of the place of Delphi and why it matters to all of us today when we are facing so many new challenges and living so many new realities?
Well, it's an extremely variegated topic, and I'm afraid I'm unable to provide all the necessary background for dealing with such a question. But I think I have some ideas to present to you here today, which might help some people to rethink about Delphi as a spiritual center. Because what we tend to forget is that the fundamental concept behind the function of the temple of Apollo and so on was spiritual leadership. Already in the archaic times, namely even in the 7th and the 6th century BC, Delphi was functioning as the headquarters of a huge enterprise which involved the colonization of the Mediterranean Sea, even the Black Sea. Delphi was providing the guidelines for the settlers who were embarking in establishing colonies all around the seafront that we know around the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea. Now, this was done not in a haphazard way. There was a plan behind that. And the plan was structured and developed here in Delphi. And it involved many different ways of interaction with the settlers and with the places where they were supposed to go. And this was not just giving advice or providing information that was needed for these people to be successful in the projects they were embarking on, but it involved also financial support. And this is something which I don't know why. It has been completely overlooked by our archaeologists who are digging the place here, and they have found all these wonderful so-called treasuries, but nobody has asked treasuries of what? What was in there? We know there were wonderful buildings, they had wonderful artifacts and so on, but treasury means something else, it means money. So money was indeed what it was all about. It was money that was offered as a loan to the settlers in order to establish the colonies they were going to And then they were able to return this money along with some interest. And that was how the whole project was supposed to work. So this is an aspect of the life of Delphi, which has not been examined as it should be, and it had immense repercussions. I was just thinking of, let's say, the campaign of Alexander the Great. We read at the historian's report of the time that when Alexander reached Ecbatana now, for example, in Persia, he found Greek settlers there. Where did they come from? We are never told. They were there for many centuries, and they have been sent there in order to establish a colony or some kind of a community which was waiting for somebody to come to liberate them or to do what Alexander did. So it was a long-term project that had started already in the 7th century. We have testimony of people from Asia Minor who were sent by Delphi, Delphi is mentioned by Herodotus specifically, to go as far as Spain, outside the Gibraltar Straits, in an area which was known for mining tin, which was a very important commodity for the time for making bronze. So these people started from Asia Minor. They went all the way to Spain to establish a colony, and they were trading tin. Can you imagine that? That was in the 6th century BC. It's incredible. But it happened, and it all happened because Delphi was advising these people, who was providing the knowledge necessary, because, of course, they need to know the geography, the climate situation, all this, in order to do all this. So this spiritual aspect of what Delphi was offering to Greece at the time is something which is completely overlooked, and very sadly so. Now, one has to rethink about the whole functioning of the place for reasons which I'm afraid have to do with the way Delphi is promoted to the tourist industry today. People tend to see Delphi as a kind of hub of irrationality. So we have the Pythia, which delivered these strange oracles, and nobody could understand what she was talking about, and she was chewing laurel leaves, and she was inhaling some strange fumes coming from the earth. All this is rubbish. If you look at the ancient sources, there is not a single mention of all this there. It's all lies. And I'm telling you this because I have investigated it specifically, and all the literature agrees that none of this ever happened. There were some Christian authors who tried to denigrate Delphi and have given some clues which may be interpreted in this manner. But the ancient sources themselves had no mention of these things. And this is what we hear. If you go to listen to the tourists visiting the site and ask them, what do you know about Delphi? They will tell you all this nonsense about Pythia munching laurel leaves. You know, Dodds, a famous scholar who wrote the famous book on Greek and the irrational, has a wonderful passage where he describes a German scholar called Österreich, a famous student of ancient demonism. And he said, Professor Österreich collected buckets of laurel leaves, and he chewed them in order to get inspired. But in the end, he was no more inspired than he was when he started. So, it's a complete misconception of what was happening in Delphi, and one has to overcome this in order to reach to come to Costa now, to what for Costa was the most important aspect of Delphi. Because Costa, who was an extremely knowledgeable person and who knew all about international politics and economics and he had a very deep understanding of modern history, he realized very soon that all these different ways of dealing with contemporary problems lead to impasse. The only way through, the only way to overcome the problems that we are facing now, look at what's happening around us in Ukraine or wherever. I'm not trying to blame anybody. I'm just saying we have a problem. And the only way to overcome this problem is through culture. And I think this was exactly what Costas was aiming at in a very perceptive manner, and we owe him a great debt for this.
Thank you, Pavlos, so for putting us on the right track. So stop chewing laurels. I mean, you can do it, but don't expect much to happen from there. But I loved what you have said, that it was a headquarter of a huge enterprise. So we are thinking, of course, it's sacred. It is a sacred place, but it was also an enterprise. So perhaps that means that having a Delphi Economic Forum in here, it's not so much out of place. It's very much in respect of that spirit of the place to have not only the European Cultural Center that exists for 50 years and that you have been director for the last 6 years, but to have such a debate, such a conversation, world conversation on world issue in this place is a very good initiative. And there is also an initiative called the World Human Forum that also has chosen to be based in Delphi, presided by Alexandra Mitsotakis, and together with this World Human Forum, we teamed up as Europa Nostra, not just here for Delphi, but also for an initiative in Delos, Alpha Mission Delos. So just to show that there is a sort of, we all together collectively are somehow recreating that spirit of the place, but in a holistic way, with having the landscape incorporated in this. And even the soundscape, and that was what Jorge Chaminé was supposed to tell you. We will make sure that this is disseminated in the report of that, because he was also mentioning how important for Delphi was the sound and the music and the first ancient hymns that were here composed, and how much in this whole 21st century also, building Europe also through sound, and the importance of music was something which is linked to the landscape as well. Bruce, you have also had many conversations with Costa on many issues, history, heritage, faith, and you, since you are an eminent journalist and writer, you have just published a book, recently a book, Athens, the City of Wisdom. I suppose it's about the spirit of the place of Athens. Indeed. And how would you sort of define what was the spirit of the place of Delphi for you, for Costa, and how can we all together communicate better? Because you are a communicator.
Thank you. Well, may I begin by just a personal note of tribute and gratitude to the Carras family. I mean, my 50 years of association with Greece are really very intimately linked with the Carras family. I came to Greece as a 17-year-old, as it happened, working as a teacher for a family very closely associated with the Carrases. Back in 1985, my great colleague and essayist, Christopher Hitchens, brought me to the Carras household in the Plaka, a very exciting moment. In the 90s, I got to know the Carras family in London, and then we've had many wonderful interactions in Athens since then. So, I mean, it feels both a great honor and at the same time supremely appropriate to be speaking at this forum, just on a very personal note. Being nearly 64, I can say that sort of 5/6 of my life almost have been in some way or other guided by the Carras family. And I've been trying to imagine, if Costa were sitting here, what sort of conversation we would be having. I mean, he was a very creative interpreter of the spirit of place. I mean, one of the seminal moments in his life, I think, was organizing a conference on the island of Patmos, which really set the tone for in the broader sense, environmental theology, environmental spirituality. The principle now widely accepted that issues like climate change or atmospheric pollution can't really be dealt with unless the spiritual dimension is acknowledged. Now, the genius of Costa on that particular occasion was to see that Patmos doesn't imply apocalypse, it doesn't imply disaster. On the contrary, Patmos could be a place of hope, a new heaven and a new earth. So it was a wonderfully creative interpretation of the spirit of Patmos. And I'm trying to think what he would be saying, what kind of conversation we would be having if he were sitting here. I think that, he was very interested in definitions of wisdom. I mean, any Hellenist is interested in the rich layers of meaning that the word Sophia contains. And there are different words in Greek that refer to different kinds of wisdom. I mean, sophrosine, prudence very broadly, but a richer term than prudence. Very, very important term in both ancient Greek and modern Greek. And I think we could probably have a wonderful conversation about that. If I may speak, very personally, at this time of the year, Costa, as a practicing Orthodox Christian, would be saying the Lenten prayer twice a day, and it would be a prayer for sophrosine, tapinophrosine, hypomone και αγάπη, prudence, humility, patience, and love, and he would have seen those virtues as interconnected. So a very rich understanding of the different shades that wisdom can have. I think another topic that would come up if we were discussing it is that Delphi was, like so many places, fought over. I mean, one of the features of the history of the 4th century BC is the so-called sacred wars, when all the various powers in central Greece and then ultimately Macedonia were fighting to control Delphi. With the decline of Sparta as the principal land power in Greece, it was open season on this very, very desirable piece of real estate. But the mysterious thing is that the holiness, if you want to call it that, or the aura, the mystery, the sanctity of Delphi was not compromised in a sense. I mean, that just as the Olympic Games keep a kind of aura about them in ancient times and in modern times that is not damaged by warfare, in the same way I feel that the holiness of Delphi, or the specialness of Delphi, let's be more neutral, was somehow not compromised by warfare. And I would say that it's the same in most of the world's holy places. They do attract wars. I mean, if you go to Jerusalem now, you will see that at the Holy Sepulchre, 6 different Christian sects are competing for different sort of segments of the Holy Sepulchre. And then, 3 different major religions are competing for Jerusalem. And yet there is an aura about Jerusalem which somehow transcends, human battles, human competition, and it retains its integrity. And I hope that Costa and I would be agreeing that there is something about Delphi, call it mystery, don't call it sanctity if you don't want to call it sanctity, but something special about Delphi, which was not compromised by the fact that human beings, fought over it. It's a matter of shame in a way that it was fought over, but the mystery remained. And I think a feature of any place of pilgrimage, any holy place, is that as you approach it, at a certain point, you have to set aside your worldly affiliations, your personal jealousies, your passions on behalf of yourself, your family, your town, and you just approach it as a humble pilgrim, if you like, because the place transcends everything. And I would say that Delphi is one of those places.
Thank you, Bruce. I was really feeling Costa sitting here next to us, and the spirit of Costa is so much present in this room. And this wonderful thing that you have said, that some places are so sacred and there is some kind of mystery that no fights, no wars, nothing can somehow put them down. And in the times that we are living now, it is a fantastic message that you have shared with us. And And, you know, that message of hope that you said, that was something that Costa was also always projecting, whether it is Delphi or it is Patmos on other places. And I think this is something, Lydia, perhaps we have a few more minutes. Perhaps you, just a final message from you with all what we have heard. You know, the message. What is the message that we are sending to all these wonderful people here? And thank you also. I think Christo, his brother, is here. We have Alexandra and George Prokopiou, very strong supporters of Elliniki, Etairia, Europa, Nostra. All of you, we have a message for you also at the end of this conversation, because we need to mobilize.
I think the message is from both Elliniki, Etairia, us here, and Europa Nostra. It's a common message that this very, very special place, which is surrounded by this mystical, special landscape, we should all make sure that it will continue to be protected, that we can have our ambitions and our, whatever else we want outside this very, very special place. Let us leave these special places like Delphi for us and for future generations. They have something to tell men at all ages. This is what I think Costa would have liked us to finish with.
Yes,
The
very, very important.
Of the landscape of Delphi.
And we hope to have the support also of this formidable Delphi Economic Forum for this important goal. Pavlos, you wanted to add at the end something.
Since I didn't say much about the environment aspect of all this, which I think is extremely important, I just want to say that there is also a deep misconception about the Delphic landscape itself, which is in part due to the fact that nowadays we come to Delphi through Livadia. So we come the wrong way, actually. Yeah. In antiquity, people were coming by the sea. That's why I have distributed this text from Heliodorus. Some of you may have it. So you can see the ancient perspective of Delphi, which is coming up from the sea and looking across at the two imposing mountains. One is black, it's called Giona, and the other one is white, and it's called Parnassus. So this contrast between these mountains, I think, is the essence of the Delphi landscape. And if you interfere in any way with this, you destroy everything about Delphi. So I just wanted to mention this. I think it's a very important topic, and I'm willing to develop it at another occasion.
Thank you, Pavlos. I'm sure that will be one of those Greek paths of culture. Perhaps next year we will be walking all together from the sea up to Delphi. So that could be another expedition we could organize together. So thank you so much for being with us. I think we have 5 last minutes will be dedicated to a contribution by Mr. Arsenis. Costa was also very engaged in all what is climate action. And I think we have here, just last 5 minutes will be dedicated to the important communication on this topic.
Καλησπέρα σας. Είναι μεγάλη τιμή για μένα που συμμετέχω σε αυτό το αφιέρωμα στον Κώστα Καρά και την Ελληνική Εταιρεία. Ένα από τα μεγάλα έργα της Ελληνικής Εταιρείας, τόσο σε διάρκεια, πρόκειται για ένα 8ετές ευρωπαϊκό πρόγραμμα, όσο και σε πόρους που χρειάζεται για να το υλοποιήσουμε, είναι αυτό, η συμμετοχή της Ελληνικής Εταιρείας στο πρόγραμμα για την κλιματική αλλαγή, το Adapting Greece. Είναι ένα 8ετές πρόγραμμα και μεταξύ των 18 φορέων η Ελληνική Εταιρεία είναι η μόνη εταιρεία από την κοινωνία των πολιτών, η μόνη μη κυβερνητική οργάνωση που συμμετέχει. Για να καταλάβετε όμως για το τι διαπραγματεύεται, θα ξεκινήσουμε με ένα μικρό τηλεοπτικό σποτ που έχουμε ετοιμάσει για να μεταδοθεί σε όλους τους τηλεοπτικούς σταθμούς της χώρας. Υπάρχει και εκφώνηση της Μάγιας Τσόκλη που διαβάζει όλα αυτά που βλέπετε. Όταν δηλαδή τα κλιματικά προβλήματα εντείνονται και οι πυρκαγιές και οι ραγδαίες βροχοπτώσεις, τότε το κλίμα αλλάζει και πρέπει να αλλάξουμε κι εμείς. Για κάποιο λόγο δεν ακούστηκε η εκφώνηση της Μάγιας Τσόκλη. Ίσως μπορούμε να το δούμε στο τέλος. Στα πλαίσια αυτού του προγράμματος ρωτήσαμε την ελληνική κοινή γνώμη για το πώς βλέπει την κλιματική αλλαγή. Και τα συμπεράσματα ήταν πολύ ενδιαφέροντα και πάρα πολύ σύντομα θα σας τα παρουσιάσουμε. Δεν είναι η πρώτη φορά που η ελληνική εταιρεία κάνει μια δημοσκόπηση για τα θέματα του περιβάλλοντος. Παλιότερες δημοσκοπήσεις δείξανε κάτι σημαντικό, ότι η αλλαγή του κλίματος απασχολούσε το ελληνικό κοινό πολλά χρόνια και στην αρχή ήταν μικρή η ενασχόληση του ελληνικού κοινού και σιγά σιγά οι φόβοι για την αλλαγή του κλίματος μεγάλωναν. Αν δούμε τι είδαμε στην τελευταία δημοσκόπηση, βλέπουμε ότι ο Έλληνας τοποθετεί στα προβλήματα της καθημερινότητάς του την κλιματική αλλαγή δεύτερο πρόβλημα μετά την ανεργία. Και στα προβλήματα που αφορούν όλη τη χώρα, οι Έλληνες πιστεύουμε ότι το πιο σημαντικό πρόβλημα που αντιμετωπίζουμε αυτή τη στιγμή είναι η κλιματική αλλαγή. Κάτι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό. Οι πολίτες της χώρας, οποιαδήποτε κομματικής κατεύθυνσης, πιστεύουν, σε αντίθεση με άλλες χώρες όπου η κοινωνία είναι διχασμένη, στην Ελλάδα όλοι πιστεύουμε ότι η κλιματική αλλαγή είναι ένα πάρα πολύ σημαντικό πρόβλημα που πρέπει να αντιμετωπιστεί. Και αυτό ισχύει και για όλα τα ηλικιακά κοινά, δηλαδή και από τους νέους, όπου έχουμε μία μικρότερη κατανόηση, αλλά κυρίως από τις ηλικίες 45 με 56, που δείχνουν περισσότερο ευαισθητοποιημένοι. Εδώ, σύμφωνα με μία μελέτη της Τράπεζας της Ελλάδος, οι περιοχές που θα νιώσουν τον αντίκτυπο της κλιματικής αλλαγής με πλημμύρες, με ξηρασία, είναι αυτές που έχουμε εδώ. Είναι η Κρήτη, η Δυτική Μακεδονία, το Αιγαίο και η Πελοπόννησο. Η έρευνά μας έδειξε κάτι σημαντικό, ότι οι πολίτες αυτών των περιοχών δήλωσαν ότι δεν έχουν σωστή ενημέρωση σε σχέση με την κλιματική αλλαγή και τις επιπτώσεις της. Αυτό είναι ένα εργαλείο το οποίο μπορεί να οδηγήσει τόσο το κράτος, αλλά τόσο και εμάς με τα φόρουμ, με τα συνέδρια που κάνουμε πληροφόρησης των πολιτών για τις επιπτώσεις και για την ενημέρωση στην προσαρμογή στην κλιματική αλλαγή. Κάτι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό, οι πολίτες είπαν ότι για την κλιματική αλλαγή φταίνε οι δράσεις των ανθρώπων, οι περισσότεροι είπαν αυτό, και φυσικά και τα φυσικά αίτια, ενώ πολύ ενθαρρυντικό είναι το γεγονός ότι πιστεύουμε σε αυτά που μας λένε οι επιστήμονες. Ποιος φταίει για την κλιματική αλλαγή? Και αυτό είναι σημαντικό. Οι Έλληνες πολίτες είπαν ότι ο κάθε άνθρωπος και οι δράσεις όλων μας είναι κρίσιμοι παράγοντες για την κλιματική αλλαγή και ακολουθούν οι δράσεις και οι αποφάσεις και οι στρατηγικές των ισχυρών κρατών. Ποιες είναι οι δράσεις, τι κάνουν οι Έλληνες πολίτες? Κυρίως ανακυκλώνουν και επαναχρησιμοποιούν. Θα θέλουν να κάνουν και άλλα πράγματα, όπως να χρησιμοποιούν το τρένο αντί για το αεροπλάνο, όπως να αλλάξουν τις συσκευές τους ως προς την κατανάλωση, αλλά δεν το έχουν αποφασίσει ακόμη. Και από πού ενημερώνονται, και κάπου σιγά σιγά τελειώνουμε, ενημερώνονται από το ραδιόφωνο που το θεωρούν το πιο αξιόπιστο μέσο, από το διαδίκτυο και πιο πολύ από τη τηλεόραση, αλλά δεν το θεωρούν τόσο αξιόπιστο όσο τα δύο προηγούμενα. Και για να μιλήσουμε και για να κλείσουμε τι συμβαίνει με τις νεαρές ηλικίες, 16 και πάνω, υπάρχει μεγάλο έλλειμμα ενημέρωσης στα σχολεία σε σχέση με την κλιματική αλλαγή και τις επιπτώσεις της. Μόλις ένα 40% απάντησε ότι έχει ενημερωθεί και τις περισσότερες φορές τους μίλησε ένας καθηγητής. Μέσα στο πρόγραμμα που κάνουμε για το Life IP έχουμε ιδρικές δράσεις στα σχολεία. Τρέξαμε ήδη έναν πάρα πολύ πετυχημένο διαγωνισμό με εκπληκτικά βίντεο και άλλα έργα. Αυτή ήταν η έρευνα. Τώρα, αυτή τη στιγμή σχεδιάζουμε την δεύτερη, μετά από 3 χρόνια σχεδιάζουμε την δεύτερη έρευνα για να μετρήσουμε αν βελτιώθηκε καθόλου η γνώση της ελληνικής κοινωνίας και η στάση της απέναντι στην κλιματική αλλαγή. Νομίζω ότι κράτησα το χρόνο. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Θα μπορούσαμε να δούμε αν παίζει και το βίντεο και με την εκφώνηση. Σας παρακαλώ. Γιατί είναι πολύ καλή το βίντεο με τη βοήθεια της μάγιας της Τσόκλη και είναι κρίμα να μην το ακούσουμε. Όχι, δεν παίζει. Όταν οι καύσωνες μεγαλώνουν, γίνονται μεγαλύτεροι. Όταν οι περίοδοι ξηρασίας είναι μεγαλύτερες και οι πυρκαγιές πιο έντονες και οι ξαφνικές μπόρες πιο συχνές, τότε το αύριο είναι τώρα. Πρέπει η προσαρμογή τώρα για όλους. Το κλίμα αλλάζει. Εμείς, αυτά λέει η μάγια, αλλά δυστυχώς σας τα είπα εγώ. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.